Hi there. Welcome to the Spiritual Embodiment Podcast. I am your host, Samantha Redondo, licensed therapist and embodiment coach. And I am so delighted to have my bestie, Victoria Greer Hathaway, with us today. Welcome.
Hi, glad to be here.
Yes, so excited. Well, I would love to start just by you letting the audience know the identities you're showing up with today.
Sorry, that's such a great question. I'm not laughing. I'm laughing because
it's not too therapist-y for you.
No, the identities I'm showing up with. I'm just also goofball, silly goose, I think might be one. Astrologer, proud queer human, and alien.
Love it.
We'll start there. That's how I identify today.
People are already bought in. They're already intrigued. It's great.
Well, I realized when you first said, I went into an accent, like the very first question you asked me, and I was like, this is already starting off weird. So,
but it's us. So like,
yeah,
of course,
it's us.
There's going to be accents and giggles and all the things. So I would love to hear just a little bit of background because this is the Spiritual Embodiment Podcast. Like, give us a little bit of the origin story of your spirituality.
Oh my, I love this question. It's a good question. I think my spirituality probably started when my dad died when I was 3. So my dad died 8 days before I turned 3. And pretty early on, I don't really have memories of this, but like I have like sense memories of it. He started appearing to me and talking to me, and my mom was like, oh, you were talking to him like all the time. You would be like, Dad's here. So I think, and I have to give this to my mom, that she, even though we were in a Christian, I think at the time we were in a Presbyterian church where that would have definitely not been encouraged. She never discouraged it. It was always really encouraged to have that connection. And, growing up, we went from Presbyterian to Methodist to like a full gospel word of faith church. So we definitely went into a more mystical realm as I got older. But there was so much fear surrounding it. It was so like, oh gosh, you might talk to the devil, and, you definitely shouldn't talk to people that have passed on. And, there's a rapture that could be happening at any second. But I will say that one thing that my mom always did a really good job of is cultivating her spirituality outside of church. And I think she encouraged us to do the same thing. And her spirituality, she modeled it for us of, talking to, what she called God, and sometimes having conversations with my father herself, and having all these experiences and she's a Sagittarius. So, not caring that maybe that didn't line up exactly with what was being taught. And, it's funny because I now don't consider myself a Christian. I don't know if I consider myself, definitely not in the way I used to. Probably not. But it's funny, like when she's like, I just don't know how you got here. And I'm like, you literally raised me this way. You raised me to ask questions and push back and think for myself. And like through all this, my sense of spirituality hasn't changed. Like, I mean, it's changed, but it hasn't gone anywhere. Like I've never questioned if spirituality existed because of religion or because of harm or abuse. Like that thought never dawned on me. I was just always like, this exists outside of structure.
Right. So you grew up in the church and had a lot of these kind of mystical, channeling experiences as well. When did, I know your story, so I feel like I'm tailoring this question. But tell us a bit about how you ended up in a cult. And
First of all, it wasn't a cult. It saved me. Okay, just kidding. How did I end up in a cult? Well, trauma. I had trauma early on, and I definitely didn't. And even though I personally think the church my mother's in is very cult-like, but I I think the thinking is very cult like. And I think she pretty much raised me into that. Like, we started at that church when I was around 10. Like, I think if we had stayed in Presbyterian and Methodist churches, I would have never ended up at Bethel. Like, that just would have never happened, because I would have thought a lot more critically. And I still think, like, I mean, and, politics aside, but like the belief system, like in Presbyterian, Methodist churches are a lot more like liberal, but I think that they're a little bit better, or Lutheran churches where there's just a little bit more like critical thinking involved versus like
Right.
drink the Kool-Aid and, well, we all saw a glory cloud, and if you're not spiritual, then you missed it, and that's your problem, and maybe you're not as of. So, I was in a culture that very much from the time I was 10 that praised these spiritual acts, whether it was speaking in tongues or falling out in the Holy Spirit or running around the church because you were hit by the Spirit or whatever it was. It was very like, or crying out and I think, watching all that, it was like, oh, that was really praised. It's the more of a connection you have that seems flamboyant, maybe for lack of better words, or just like performance-y, and whether it was performance or not, because personally I've had experience that felt really real, in some of those contexts. So I don't want to necessarily write everything off as, oh, it was all bull. But it definitely praised these external certain experiences. And I think, I was struggling with my own sexuality and who I was, and also struggling with like deep abandonment issues from my dad dying and my mom getting remarried and them divorcing and just all of that. And so I think, I was going from this, gosh, I can't think of the word, but like extremes, I guess, for lack of a better word, like extremes of partying and sleeping around and doing drugs. And some of it was just like experiment college kid stuff, like pretty normal. But I could also tell that my usage of everything felt more like it was filling a hole than it was like actually just experimentation. Like, it's like I needed those things to escape. I needed alcohol to help me make the decisions about sleeping with people. I needed the like, it just kind of, once it started, it took over. And I had never been anybody that really used drugs. I didn't have sex until I was out of high school. I never used, drank or anything like that really in high school. And so when I had this freedom and I was out on my own and had left the church, or not left the church, so to speak. It was just like I was in college and like not doing that. And I wasn't going to a Christian university, and yeah. So college, I mean, I waited
normal,
tables.
like raised in a Christian home college experience.
Yeah. And, I waited tables on Sundays. So I was like, that was good money. Like, I wasn't going to give that up for, going to church. And, I think from there, I scared myself because, like, instead of, which would have been so great if I was in college and I kind of went to some therapy in college, but it always ended up in like Christian counselors, and they wanted to put me in 12 steps for sex addiction and shit like that, when it was really like, maybe she's queer and she is like suppressing all of these things. And so I was like compulsively sleeping with men. Like, maybe if I find the right one, like something will stick or activate.
Just
like,
the right penis, maybe it'll work.
Right. If it was just the right one. Haven't found the magic penis yet. And also had some experiences with women that did not feel nearly as compulsive. So that should have been my first clue, that like when I slept with a woman, I wasn't immediately like, now we'll go sleep with 80 more. It was like, okay, I had that experience, but I had so much shame around it that I couldn't see that. I couldn't see that, like, hey, did you notice how you actually felt so much safer after hooking up with a female, and like how that experience made you feel more like yourself, and not like I was just so under shame of like, I shouldn't be doing this. I'm going to hell. And so I think honestly, I used to say, oh, I went to Bethel or I went to these places because I was trying to, heal from my abandonment, heal from my dad's stuff. And I think maybe a little bit, but I think what I was really doing was running away from my sexuality. And I was running to a place so subconsciously that was like, we'll fix you, we'll heal you. And there was definitely like strong conversion therapy vibes at both JH Ranch and Bethel. And there were a lot of closeted queer people claiming to have overcome homosexuality and all this stupid shit.
Like
and
covert conversion therapy stuff.
Yes. And so, yeah, I think I was running from that because I also grew up in the South. I grew up in like Franklin, Tennessee, which is outside of Nashville, which is like one of the most conservative counties, even though like Nashville's pretty liberal. It's very old money and conservative. And it's just, and like, I remember even like, and I was doing vocal performance and like, so there's a little, and so I'd want to get jobs in churches and stuff like that because they paid really well if you sang in their choirs, like in these bigger churches, like in downtown Nashville. And like, nobody cared if you were gay. Like everybody in the choir was gay, but we didn't talk about it. So there was just a lot of like shame being told that like you're not allowed to be who you are. And so I think that going to a place, it's like, great, we don't think that's really who you are and we can change you, seemed like a really good idea. And I think I was just running from that.
Yeah, totally. So I know that on your podcast, you talk about your experience and other podcasts you've been on with JH and Bethel. So I feel like we don't fully have to go into that time because that would take up probably another 2 hours.
Whole episode. Yeah. That's all we would talk about.
You are going to have our episode talking about like how we met and all that stuff on your podcast eventually. So
yes,
I will
on our
link
best
that
friend day
when it comes out. Yes, on best friend day. So I feel like we don't have to get into that whole story, but I'd love if you would share like how you got into astrology, like kind of from the church, from these like closeted church vibes to cult land, and then how you became an astrologer.
Yeah. So I was working with this couple named Abby and Justin Stumval, and they were, in my opinion, extremely controlling, especially her. And they were teaching me how to do life consulting along with, actually, it'll be 10 years this year. They like gathered a group of us, and she had been my revival group pastor, and she was definitely in the camp of like covert, what did you call it earlier? Covert conversion therapy. Where it was like, and she was just surrounded by, in my opinion, and some like, now I know, like out queer people, but closeted queer people that were just like, let's suppress, like let's
not even in your opinion, like it was obvious.
No. And also had experiences and was like, quote unquote, struggling with same-sex attraction is what they would call it. And I put that in quotes for those of y'all listening. Like, I don't think that's a thing. I think that's crap. But anyway, so she surrounded herself with all these people that had really bad mother wounds, abandonment wounds, and she was just there to heal and fix everybody. And so I just fell right in that trap. Plus she cussed and talked about sex, and that was fun. And so it felt like there was this rebellion, and they were like the cool, but really it was just like, I listened to her, and like sometimes I'll like kind of go to her clips and I'm like, oh no, this is patriarchy and like it just sexism and all of this tied up in conservatism, white nationalism, like all tied up in this bow of like emotional health. And she was also the only one there talking about emotional health because she read like 4 Brene Brown books and went to therapy. Like she thought that she was able to then, which is, part of you being in that culture made you want to go into therapy because there was so much of that pseudo bull therapy going on. And I definitely got caught in that. And then, I'm somebody that shocking people would come to and talk to. And so Justin and Abby noticed that, and they were like, oh, well, we'll train you to do what we do because, we should be doing this. So we'll go ahead and make sure that you do this. And so they trained me in like a group of, I don't know, it's somewhere between, it kind of ranged from like 3 to 5 of us, and trained us as life consultants. And essentially what they were having us do was pseudotherapy. And
with no training themselves in trauma therapy, any of that.
Right. And honestly, I think I was probably the most skilled at noticing like, hey, she kind of seems like she might have BPD. Maybe we need to refer her. Maybe she has some signs of bipolar. Like, obviously, I'm not diagnosing anybody, but like, I was seeing like, I think something else is going on here besides she just doesn't love herself. So maybe we should outsource these people, because here I am like, and I'm also being traumatized by what these people are telling me. Like, some real, like, they were stuck in abuse. Some of them were like abusing other people. Like, it was a lot of like stuff. I was like, I don't know what to do. And so I just keep going to these two people and being like, this is what's coming up. And they just basically, it felt like, well, if you can't handle it, then maybe you just shouldn't be doing this, versus like, oh, maybe we should outsource this. And so,
and there was a lot of like merit, or like, I don't know the word, but like, you were in the inner circle, and these people,
right,
like Abby and Justin, were like, you said, the cool pastors, like everyone kind of wanted to be around them, and being trained by them was like a highly sought after
yes
role in the
yes
community.
Thank you for adding that. Yeah, because I mean, like, nobody would have been like, I mean, somebody probably would have if I had asked, but like the average person around me wouldn't have been like, this seems like a bad idea. And then also, I'm like, what, 26 at this point? My college degree's in vocal performance. What the hell am I going to do? Like, I guess I'll do. And like, the truth is, I am really good at coaching and talking to people. It's a big part of what I do now. Yeah. So that was natural for me. Would I have probably gone into pseudo life like therapy without these people? Probably not. I don't know where I would have found myself. I probably would have ended up on the same path I'm on right now in a different way. But so they train. And so I moved to Nashville, and in like a year after that, kept training online, kept taking these clients that were literally traumatizing both of us. Like, I know I caused harm to other people by having somebody that wasn't trained, that had no business working with them. And so just in this weird, but also like living in a really expensive city, and I won't go into all this, but she was taking a decent chunk of my income of every client. So where I'm not charging that much.
Even after you left the
yeah,
church
even after,
the city.
yes. Yeah. And so I'm in Nashville, and I'm just, and like, I'm away from her. I'm away from them. I'm away from this influence. I'm living with my roommate who's queer, like, and he was out at the time. And the whole time I was just like, this is like, stuff's not adding up. Like, what y'all are saying and what I'm learning, because like Reading is such a small town, and so when you're in it, that can feel like a whole world, and it's like almost the town feels like a cult. And so, you know, coming back to Nashville and kind of like having my eyes open and being like, okay, like, this is reality. Like, this is, I still was on, because the thing is while I was there, I had all these spiritual gifts open up, and like, and some of the craziest experiences happened completely outside of, it was just while I was alone. So like, it wasn't in these big group think situations. It was in these like really private moments. And I started having even more of those when I moved to Nashville. And honestly, the more I started getting into like chakras and energy, and, you know, I'm a searcher, and I like to explore other ways of thought. I always have. And I think once I kind of got past, like, I'm not going to go to hell for that, and it's not scary, because that was the thing. Like, I always was pulled to it. Like, I remember I had friends that were like into tarot and stuff. Like, I was always pulled to some of this stuff, especially from like talking to my dad and having this like other, because again, they would all tell us don't talk to dead people, but I was like, I talk to him and he seems great, and actually dead people talk to me all the time, so I don't really see what the problem is here. And like, I innately understood how to have boundaries and with them, and so I did have really good boundaries with like, and still do, with like the spiritual realm. And I just started looking at stuff outside of her. And I remember I was listening to this podcast at the time, To Be Magnetic. But the thing is, she had also given us books like, I can't remember, but it was like, it's some new age manifestation book. So it's like, she kind of was the one that opened the door.
Was it like The Secret or something?
It was something
like
it was, like Quantum Success, I think was the name of it. It was something like that. And I remember, so I was like, you gave us this book. Like, I'm so confused. Like, honestly, felt very similar to like my experience with my mother. I'm like, you did this. Like, you're the one
and Bethel
that
did a lot of that, like borrowing from
Yes.
New Age and like stamping Jesus on it.
Yes.
Like, it's all the same. And it's like, no, you guys are like way closer to this New Age stuff than like maybe when it like a Presbyterian church or something
Yes.
like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I started listening to this podcast, To Be Magnetic, which is kind of on the same vibe. Like and also like, and I could tell even then and even more so now, like I could just tell that Lacey Phillips, the host, and I was like, you can just tell she's doing her own work. Like she's got people around her that are experts that are advising her. Like she's not like, it felt so different than what Abby was doing, which was I'm just gonna kind of suck from all these different places, label it as my own, and then go around as this like thought leader who's actually just barely healing themselves and not even really that, and then trying to like, that's what it was. Like she was having so many chronic health issues, she was just trying to fix her outer world and control everyone around her because she couldn't control her own body, which is like really sad but fucked up. Sorry, that might be a little strong, but like it's really messed up. And so when I started listening to Lacey's podcast, I was like, I just think I saw a contrast. I was like, oh, Lacey's like interviewing all these different people, and she seems to be talking to neuroscientists and therapists and experts. She doesn't seem to just be, and she's also not saying she's the expert on all those things either.
Right.
She's actually
pulling people in.
Yes, she's pulling people in. And I think that idea just like really resonated with me, being in a place of like, there's one guru, there's one thought leader, and they have all the answers. Like listening to somebody that was like, doesn't claim to have all the answers, that's like figuring it out themselves. And she had a human design expert on there, and I was instantly like, okay, this is interesting, because I love a system. Any type of a system I love, and I promise I won't be so long-winded with all my answers, but this was just a long answer to get to understand like the nuance behind it. And so I started like got into human design. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And then I just honestly, it was just like the podcast. I kept going to like this podcast, and I'd go to Almost 30, and I went to the Balanced Blonde, and I like all these that were like popular podcasts like in the 2016 era. I just kind of made
podcasts were like popping off. That was like the Instagram podcast, like when people really blew up.
Yes. And so, you know, I'm just kind of, and I felt like, and I'd hear about human design, and I was like, there's something that just didn't click with me about it. And not that I think there's anything wrong with it, and I use human design now, but it just didn't like land in my body the way astrology eventually would. And then I remember like she had an astrologer on there, and I just was like, everything in my whole being was like, this is it. And then I remember like looking at my chart for the first time and looking at all the pieces, and I still remember the chart I was looking at. I remember like exactly where I was standing, how I felt. Like it literally just felt like this reawakening and this remembering of how to read charts. I mean, and I know I didn't know everything instantly, but it's felt like my whole journey, I knew the things I needed to learn. Like I always kind of knew, I was like, okay, I need to remember this. Pretty much self-taught myself in a really short amount of time, and to the point that I was able to read a chart really, really quickly. And I think part of it was that self-trust, like, you know, spirit, not to just use but spiritual embodiment. Like I was embodying that journey while exploring it. So that's my very long-winded answer. And I promise you I will not be that long-winded again.
I love it. I mean, it's the context of where you are today, which is so important. So yeah, you kind of named already like this formula guru. Like I've been talking about that on the podcast, like when we've been in these cultures where it's very formulaic, there's like one person or one group of people that have the secret wisdom, the secret knowledge, and then transitioning from that to ritual of like creating our own practices of self-knowing, self-trust. So I'd love just a peek into like that journey for you of embodying astrology, of like finding this path that felt like remembering, that felt like, oh, I know how to do this, like my body knows this. What were some of the like practices and rituals that helped you during that time?
That's a good question. Well, simultaneously while I was doing that, I also was unknowingly going into the Akashic Records. I didn't realize I was in the Akashic Records, which is like, the Akashic Records is like a cosmic library where all information is stored. People like Nikola Tesla, Einstein, Beethoven, Mozart, they all claim, like Thomas Edison, they all have journal entries or things like claiming to connect to this other realm. And at that time, I was just meditating a lot because I had moved to a new city. I didn't know a lot of people. And I was just spending a lot of time meditating and going into the records. And I feel like that was, it doesn't feel directly tied, but I feel like it was. And I was just manifesting a lot more and like visualizing a lot more of like the life I wanted. And then at the same time, like astrology just felt like this, because I remember I had like 5 different people, and I still have the book, and you were one of the people of like, I was gonna like take 5 people that I knew really well. So it was like you, ended up being my ex, but like the guy I was dating at the time, my brother, my mom, and my roommate. And it was like you 5, and I looked at your charts every time I learned something new. I would be like, okay, who are these? And so there was this like practice for me of like kind of, and myself, of course, of like getting to re-know myself through this, and then also the people around me. I don't even know if like I'm ADHD, and so I hyper focus, and so I don't even know if I think there were rituals around it as much as it was just this like inhaling of information. And just like, but I mean, I do think the meditation was a big part of it. And I think now looking back on it, I think that's probably, I just didn't know what I was doing. So I think I'm like looking at it in retrospect, being like, well, I was meditating and I was visualizing and I was going to the Akashic Records and I was doing yoga and I was just kind of doing what felt good. And I think now understanding astrology and how it works is I was having these different points in my chart activated, and it was triggering things. And so I needed to do breath work, meditation, yoga, and like move through that energy because there was stuff coming up. And, you know, at that time I still wasn't in therapy, and I was trying to move through everything myself, or with you on the phone.
Yeah. Right. And I think it's so cool to think about that time because I was your friend and we were like processing a lot of that on the phone together. Like how intuitively you did pull on all of these resources. Like you got Reiki trained and you were doing like the breathwork stuff and the to be magnetic, you know, manifestation training. And like you just were the student of all these different kind of like modalities. And it honestly reminds me of like my experience in grad school. Like we're just learning all these therapy modalities, and then you kind of pick your lane. So you get that like breadth of all these things, and then you integrate it all once you kind of go deep and like, oh, this is how I work. And it sounds like astrology was like that depth for you, that like river underground, like kind of flowing through everything that you were exploring and experimenting with.
Yeah. And I think it was just because I'm a Capricorn and I have a ton of earth in my chart. And I think and earth is Virgo, Taurus, or Capricorn. And earth needs practicality. They need like a tangible system. And so, you know, like water signs, Cancer, Pisces, Scorpio, like they might be a little bit more okay with just going through these systems and like floating and trying out these different things. I needed like a place for everything to go. Like and I don't know now that you're kind of saying all that, because it is the person that I am, but also not the person that I am. I kind of like to know where I'm going and why. And I don't really I think I've gotten more okay with the collecting of things, but I think my like core self is like, but where are we going? But like, you know, the core of me is like, we need to be going in a direction. And I think astrology helped my logical brain be like, hey, we don't really know where we're going right now, but just use all that mental power to learn all these patterns. And like so I think I almost needed my brain occupied so I could go on this journey.
Right. Well, it's like our meaning making, right? We need that sense of like organizing. And I think any spiritual system gives us that, right? Whether it's theology or astrology or, you know, some sort of belief framework. It's like, how do I organize the kind of chaos of life and my experiences? And then like the practices, the rituals is like what grounds that into our real lives from kind of that big picture meaning making thing, which for you was astrology and still is.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you mentioned like you kind of, when you moved to Nashville, you were learning all this, you had like kind of these 5 people who were a bit of your community, moving from like, I know, a really tight knit of folks when you were with Abby and Justin, and like community at Bethel. That, I mean, both of our experiences there, like you were just with people all the time. We were talking about this the other day. Like we had all these roommates that were all in the same season. Like it was a small town. You'd like run into people at Trader Joe's or at the coffee shop. And so I'm curious for you, like in that process of spiritual reconstruction, I mean, it sounds like you didn't fully go through like a deconstruction process because you kind of had these beliefs underlying, even like with the church stuff. And it was just like finding almost like more of an authenticity in those beliefs, and like a stronger foundation in that. But tell me a bit about like how community formed at this point for you.
It did not. It was it was a struggle. I mean, and I was still in and out of church. I remember at that time I like joined like a young adult small group, and it was like all college age kids or like right out of college. And I'm like, cool. Like I'm 27, 28. These guys are like 21, 22. But in a way it was also kind of fun because I was just like, because like a lot of my friends were getting married or, you know, having babies. And I was just like, that's not where I'm at right now. Like I'm in this. And I think
we were kind of primed for that at Bethel. There were so many people who came at like 18, and we were older, and so we had a lot of friends who were that age.
I was just like cool, whatever. Like, I mean, I can tell, but I mean, in a lot of ways, because I think when you're like 20 or 21, you think you've got it figured out. And then, you know, by 27, 28, you're like, I know nothing. And then the older you get, you're like, literally, I know nothing. Like so I think they also kind of it was kind of funny. There was like a juxtaposition of like, they had this like confidence, and they were all going to like Vanderbilt and crap. So they're all like pretty wealthy. I remember this one dude, like we'd go to his house, and it was like his house, his parents owned, and he just got to stay in it. I mean, it was in like Belle Meade. This had to have been like a $4 or $5 million house. Like, and we were just like going and having, and probably is now. I don't know if it was at the time, but definitely now in Nashville, this is probably like crazy. Like, I don't even know. I can't even get like just old house that had been like restored. And so these kids coming from like so much privilege and so much like they think they all have it figured out, and here I'm like smoking cigarettes, deconstructing, trying to figure out and I'm just the hot mess and I'm just like, I'm here. So it was kind of like a funny juxtaposition. But I think what I really got through that time was like, I need people, even if they're not exactly the right people. Like, I just need people, and being connected to them even. And I mean, I think nobody was trying to control me, and I was very aware of like, I didn't let myself go do the worship team. I didn't like they wanted to make me a small group leader, and I was like, I'm good. Like, I tried really hard not to do that kind of stuff because I didn't want to get pulled in. Like, and it was hard because I was from Bethel, and everybody's like, oh, you're from Bethel, you know, and so they wanted to pull me in because it was that type of church. And then, you know, I mean, there was a long period of time where I didn't really have community. And I mean, I had you, and I had like a few, but I mean, Nashville's in I think any big city, it's really hard to make friends in big cities. And like, and I wasn't like, I mean, I waited tables some, and then I taught voice, but I taught voice at this like Christian based studio. And so like, I really didn't jive with anybody there. And honestly, they were working us so hard. None of us really had energy to like connect. And I don't know, like Nashville for me was really hard to fit into because it was all people that were like, very few people were actually from there, and I grew up there, and it just kind of felt probably maybe similar to how you felt in LA. Like everyone was coming there to make it, and I'm just like, no. It's different when you're from there. Like you're kind of over all the glamour and promise of the city. You're like jaded by it. Exactly. So I just was like, I don't really get this. And so I did end up going kind of in the middle of all this. I ended up going to Greece and like connected with a group of women. And I think that was kind of my first realization of like, oh, you can like make friends online. You can like go find people that think like you. And actually a lot, the few people that I did meet or did connect to when I was in Nashville, it was from Lacey Phillips to Be Magnetic, like community page for Nashville. And so like I don't think I really stayed, maybe like one girl I still talk to, but like they were some of the best coffee dates like I had gone out with, because it was people that like spoke my language and they were working on themselves. And so I really forced myself to like go in and do some of these things. And it was really uncomfortable, again, especially being in a big city like that and and spirituality is definitely not really a thing in Nashville. And so like, it's like, everybody's like, oh gosh, like a lot more religious there. And so
California, where it's
yes,
a lot more like woo woo.
Yeah.
That's like normal to talk about.
Totally. And so and then I got in a relationship with somebody that was really unhealthy. And I think I was really isolating during that time, like without really knowing it. But I've just always been somebody, and I'm like this because I also grew up in Nashville. So there was a lot of people I went to high school with that lived there. So I tried to reconnect with them. And I think I think this is one reason I've always been able to have and maintain friendships for long periods of time. I don't get offended if I go out of if like I'm out of somebody's life for a few years. Like if they just, if I drift
in our friendship.
Yeah. But like, even if it's like a year or two, like, and I don't speak to somebody or a couple years or whatever, like life brings us back around. Like I just understand that that's going to happen. And so I think I don't get offended. I mean, I've definitely have a few situations that I'm like, girl, we talked like literally every day and all of a sudden you stopped talking to me. That's weird. Like, and you gave me no explanation. Like, I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about like people like, yeah, maybe you lose touch with whatever. Like, I'm always okay with those people coming back in, and I'm not, I don't take it as rejection. I don't. And I think that's really helped me in building community, of being okay with my community being really fluid. And it not being something that I like cling to. But I would say until I feel like I really started understanding how to use social media to build community, and even then I guess it was social media, most of my community was built from like, I went and did a mushroom ceremony and connected to girls from there. I went and got Reiki certified and met people from there. Like, it was things like that where I would go around people doing things that I was interested in, and then I would meet community there, and then stayed connected on the phone, on Vox, whatever.
Yeah. So tell me how you started making friends on social media, what that looks like now. And just like that support network that you've built. I just think it's so special, and I'd love for you to talk a bit about that process.
Yes. So this is like one of the things that my wife is like the most confused about, is how I do this. Like, they're always just like, I mean, it's cool, but like, you just met this person on the internet. And I was like, yeah, and now we're best friends. Like, I don't see what the problem is. That's normal. And I've always kind of been like, I don't know. Like, I think also growing up, not having a lot of friends, like, I just really understand the value of clicking with somebody. And like, I grew up doing theater, but like, I wasn't in sports. Like, I didn't have that like built-in friend group. I guess I did when I did plays. But that was kind of it. So when I started, let's see, I'm trying to think of when because like I feel like there was like a turning point. It was definitely post Saturn return, probably like I think around the pandemic, because everybody was just like a little bit more like okay with that, and like a little bit more curious. And
like,
I don't know. I think
we might as well meet people and connect online.
Yeah. And you know, I'm building my business for sure. I was, trying to connect with people, and like even Carly and Morgan in our group, like, I don't know when we started following each other, but like at some point we started following each other as like entrepreneurs who are like, probably honestly, we're trying to sell to each other. Like, we're probably lead generating each other. And that's how we all got connected. And I remember I had this one girl that was like really, she would like reach out to me a lot, and she was online, and I don't talk to her anymore, but I just remember really liking that. I was like, oh, I don't feel like she's selling to me. She never like made an offer or anything, but she just was like connecting to me. And I was like, oh, and she had like a pretty big audience. And I was like, I like that. I like that she's able to make somebody feel seen, like, while having this big platform. And I think I don't know, like, it's just this thing where I'll just start talking to somebody in DMs, and then And because I'm ADHD, I don't want to type. So I voice memo them. And like, even now that like this happened this morning where this woman like sent me a text asking me a question, and I sent her back like a 2-minute voice memo. And you could tell like in her voice, she was like, wow, I didn't expect to get like a voice. And I was like, I'm just lazy and I'm sorry. Like
That's just how I communicate.
That's just how I communicate. And I'd much rather send you a 2-minute voice memo than type out anything. And so I think I just started doing that more to people and just like, oh, I'll just start talking to you. And then they would talk back. And it'd be funny because sometimes I would do that with people and I'm like, what's this person look like? Where are they? Where are they? Like in the world, you know? But we would just be connecting over like a common thing. Like, I'm pretty sure that's probably how me and Morgan started. And then I think with her, I started, and this is, you know, I think with Morgan, I was like, do you want to do a live swap? And she was like, sure. So the first time I met Morgan was live, was like doing a live with her. And I think for a while, I just kind of saw these, and which is, I think, because of the toxicity of the coaching industry and the online entrepreneur, where like I was seeing people as leads and potential clients rather than humans. And I think, and then I also think I was attracting that because that was my perception, was like, oh, do you want to work with me? Do you want to work with me? Which I mean, I get that. Like I have an online business, but like when you're in that mode all the time, A, I think people can feel it. And B, it's like that keeps you from finding like-minded people if you're always like, it's in a very like, what can I get from you way versus like wanting to connect. And so I think just, I don't know, I've never been very salesy. I've never been to like slide in somebody's DMs and be like, do you want this thing? Like, that's just not me. And so I think it was just that. It was just like having these normal conversations of, oh, you saw that movie? This is what I saw it. And like, oh, do you watch this? But like, I've had so many conversations back and forth with people like that. And yeah, they've just like developed, and some of them, yeah, like I consider really, really good friends now, which is crazy. But it's also really beautiful that like we have that potential at this point, because like I'm such a weirdo. If the internet didn't exist, I would not probably have many friends, because it's hard to find those people. And even like here, like I have people here that I know that are into woo-woo stuff, but you know, they're South Dakota. It's South Dakota, and it's through that lens, and it's through, and versus like, you know, somebody that's, you know, on the other side of the country that's maybe a little bit more, has a different way of thought. Not saying spiritual people can't come from South Dakota or the Midwest or anywhere else, but I'm just saying like that's what I would be limited to, versus now I have the world as my oyster, I guess.
Yes. Yeah. I'd love if you would talk a little bit about our Matriarchal Collective group, because it was just like came out of your imagination and your heart and your connections, and it's like such a gift to everyone who's involved in it. So
yeah, and I think it also came out of a need, which I think is, you know, I mean, it came out of the fact that I had, you know, been in these coaching containers that were several, you know, like I think one I was in was like $1,800 a month. And I mean, there was some coaching and there was some, but a lot of it was like, it was the community. And that was the piece that I really liked of it. And I think I just was like, I was definitely not at a point where I financially could join anything. I had just moved here and I was meeting people like in person in South Dakota, and that was cool. And that was really fun. But I was just like, I'm craving, because there's also everybody here that I was meeting were building a lot of in-person businesses. And I was like, I need people that are building online businesses, because it's so different, and it's different support, and it's different, you know, they're not, and like, I need people that understand all of that. And so I honestly, I mean, oh, I guess I remember I was in this whole process of, so I was getting something called light therapy, which is really cool, from my friend Jillian. And it's like, feels like you're on a mushroom trip, but I remember getting the phrase like matriarchal business revolution. And I thought I was supposed to like change my business and change my name and change all these things, because now I understand how my energy works better. But at the time I was still very much like, if I get an idea, that's what you do. And you change everything and you rebrand everything and you go. And like, that could be a whole separate conversation. But I got this down. And then from there, I started going on this like path of really asking myself, like, what would it be like to have a matriarchal business versus a patriarchal one? And like, just did a lot of research and and pretty much put together like a course for myself pretty much. And now like people can access it, but I still don't even have it for sale. It's just like something clients can get, where it's like called the Matriarchal Shift. And it's like taking your business from a patriarchal lens to a matriarchal one, and like your life and everything. And I feel like I more made that for myself as far as like, okay, how do I shift my business? Because it had been an ick. And I didn't even know what I wanted it to be like. I just know that I hated this whole like, I made $5,000 this morning and you can too. Like, I just was so sick of that. And so sick of all this, like, look at me, be like me, the before and after. This is what I was like. This is what I'm like now. I hold the secret formula. Like, just all of that felt so gross. And then also, like, I saw, like, all these people kind of struggling at around the same spot as I was, that were, like, trying to, you know, grow their businesses, but really stuck. And then all of us trying to spend all this money to all these different experts to get the answers, when it was like, actually, between all of us, I think we could figure this out. Like,
right,
because
crowdsource our own breakthrough.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I think at first that was not how it started though. It started with just, I want to have a group of people that all think similarly, that we're setting goals and trying to get to the same place, I guess. And I want to do it in a matriarchal way. And I was like, these are the values, like reciprocity, like.
Yes. So good. And if you enjoyed this little mini series of Formula to Ritual, the neuroscience of ritual, how to build co-regulation community, and then Victoria's discussion of what in real time building a like embodied spiritual community that's like super supportive and aligned looks like, I have a workshop coming up that's going to be released in June on how to create your own ritual container. And it's going to be really specific with guided videos and a workbook where you can like customize your own ritual practices and get set up to move if you're coming out of like that formula guru centric kind of community, or maybe you had an upbringing in that and it feels like you still get drawn to these like shady coaching containers or trainings where you're just spending so much money for community. This is really going to help you like just dive down into what do you actually need, what's supportive for your nervous system, what's supportive for the life that you want to live, and how do you find people who are aligned with that. So that is coming out soon. I'll link all the things in the show notes to sign up for that. But thank you so much, Victoria, for being here. And I'm so excited to hop on over to your podcast for our next time recording together. All right, friends, we'll see you next time. Bye.